Have you ever really thought about Greenland? You know, that massive icy island. It's actually got this surprisingly long and, well, curious history with the United States trying to get its hands on it.
That's right. It's not just a recent thing at all.
No, it pops up in like the weirdest ways. You've got 19th century territory shopping right up to, diplomatic spats we've seen more recently.
Absolutely. And Greenland itself, I mean, it's the world's largest non-continental island. Something like 80% of it is covered in ice.
Wow.
And its history is deeply tied to Denmark. But its sheer size and just where it is makes it this constant point of interest internationally.
So our mission today really is to unpack why. Why has this seemingly remote place always been seen as such a big prize? We're going to dig into some, frankly, surprising facts, look at how geopolitical interests have shifted over time, and, what it all means now that the Arctic is melting.
Yeah, the melting aspect is huge.
By the end of this, you'll really get why Greenland is right at the center of global power stuff. Okay, so where do we start? Maybe back when the U.S. was really buying up land.
Let's do it. We should probably start back in 1868. U.S. Secretary of State William Seward.
Ah, Seward, Alaska guy.
Exactly. Just a year after he brokered the Alaska deal, $7.2 million from Russia, he was already looking north again.
Right, not just Greenland.
No, he was eyeing Greenland and Iceland, too.
Yeah.
He had this, well, really ambitious vision.
Okay.
Seward genuinely thought acquiring Greenland could basically let the United States, and I quote, command the commerce of the world.
Wow. Okay. Big thinking.
Huge. But the timing wasn't great. People, Congress, they were still making fun of the Alaska Purchase.
Seward's Folly, right.
Exactly. Seward's Folly, Seward's Icebox, Andrew Johnson's Polar Bear Garden, all that stuff.
Ah, cool.
So that mockery just, well, it killed his Greenland plans. Even though there was this detailed survey from 1867 painting Greenland as this land of, like, amazing abundance.
It's wild how perceptions change, isn't it? From a folly to something much more serious later on.
Definitely.
So let's jump forward. Past Seward's big ideas, nearly a century later, things get really interesting with the Cold War.
Oh, yeah. The Cold War completely changed the game for Greenland. Its location became just critical.
Right.
Well,
Ugh.
geographically, it's basically the midpoint between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. Think about that.
Right in the middle.
Exactly. And there's this quote from General H.H. Arnold, pretty stark. If there's a third war, its strategic center will be the North Pole.
Chilly.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the U.S. got a lot more room to operate in Greenland after signing a treaty with Denmark in 1951.
And they certainly used that room, didn't they? Tell us about Project Blue Jay. That sounds big.
Colossal is the word. This is a secret project, obviously. Between 51 and 53, they built the Thule Air Base.
And this wasn't easy, I take it.
Not even close. They actually compared the difficulty to building the Panama Canal.
Seriously.
Yeah. It took 12,000 workers, 300,000 tons of cargo shipped in.
Yeah.
Just immense.
Wow. And what did it do?
At its peak during the Cold War, it housed 10,000 American troops. And crucially, U.S. bombers based there could reach places like Leningrad, Moscow, in just hours.
That's incredible strategic reach. Mind-boggling scale.
And it wasn't just on the surface. They were doing stuff under the ice, too.
Mm.
Secret experiments.
Under the ice? Like what?
Well, there was Camp Sentry. Get this. A nuclear-powered city built literally under the ice sheet.
A city? What was in it?
It had, like, a bowling alley, chapels, a library, mess hall. Pretty wild stuff.
A bowling alley under the ice. Okay, that's memorable.
And there was an even crazier plan, Project Earthworm. It aimed to build this whole underground railroad network.
A railroad? For what?
To shuttle nuclear missiles around under the ice. Sort of like a hidden missile base.
Okay, that's terrifying. Did they build it?
No, thankfully that one never got completed. But it shows the thinking. And, even as late as 1955, the Pentagon was still kicking around the idea of buying Greenland. No official offer, but the interest was definitely still there.
That is just fascinating. So let's bring it to today. What makes Greenland so valuable now? Is it still about military positioning?
That's part of it, yes. But there's a huge resource angle now, too. Greenland has these vast, mostly untapped reserves of rare earth minerals.
Right, the stuff we need for all our tech.
Exactly. Smartphones, EV batteries, solar panels, wind turbines, all that relies on rare earths. And Greenland might have a lot of them.
And it's not just minerals, is it?
No, there's also potential for offshore oil and natural gas. And the key thing is all of this is becoming potentially more accessible because the ice is melting. Climate change is ironically unlocking these resources.
So the melting ice changes the resource game, but what about the geography? Still important militarily.
Oh, absolutely critical. Greenland sits right on what's called the GIUK gap. Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom.
Okay.
That gap is a vital choke point for naval movements, so it's crucial for military surveillance.
And Thule Air Base, still there.
Still there, still vital. It's called Pacific Space Base, now a transfer to the U.S. Space Force in 2020.
Space Force, wow.
Yep, and it's fundamental for U.S. Homeland Security. It has systems for early warning against missiles, tracking stuff underwater. Still a key strategic asset.
Okay, so resources, defense, but you mentioned the melting ice. That seems like it could totally reshape global trade too, right? This Northern Sea Route idea.
Exactly. The Northern Sea Route, or NSR, it's basically a shipping path connecting Northeast Asia with Northwestern Europe, but going over the top through the Arctic Ocean.
A shortcut.
A massive shortcut. Compared to the usual route through the Suez Canal, it could cut shipping distances and transit times by about a third.
A third? That's huge. What kind of impact could that actually have?
Well, some estimates suggest maybe 5.5% of all world trade could eventually shift to the NSR.
Wow.
Including maybe 15% of China's trade. Now, if that happens,
What then?
it could divert something like 2/3 of the traffic currently going through the Suez Canal. That's roughly 10,000 ships a year.
10,000 ships.
Think about the ripple effects. Huge pressure to build infrastructure in the Arctic ports, support systems, all that. And at the same time, massive economic pressure on places like Egypt and Singapore that rely on the Suez traffic. It redraws the map.
But there must be downsides. Environmentally.
There are trade-offs, yeah. Shorter routes mean less fuel burned per trip, which is good.
Right.
But that's likely offset by just more trade overall between Asia and Europe, and potentially more polluting industries shifting to East Asia because the shipping's cheaper.
Yeah.
So the net environmental gain is questionable.
Okay, so it's complex. And are there practical problems? Is the route actually usable year-round yet?
Not easily. There's still major challenges. You've still got ice, so ships need to go slower or be icebreakers or ice strengthened.
Which costs more.
Right. Then there are Russian fees for passage, for icebreaker escorts, customs. Weather forecasting up there is still pretty basic for commercial ships.
And safety.
Search and rescue is patchy. Not many places to pull in if you have trouble. Russia set up the Northern Sea Route Administration back in 2013 to help coordinate things, provide icebreaker support, logistics. But yeah, it's still tough going.
So this massive potential, these challenges, it's all happening against a backdrop of, well, intense international interest. Which brings us to that rather dramatic incident in 2025.
Ah, yes. The attempted acquisition. That was quite something.
Tell us about it. It involved a phone call.
A very fiery phone call, apparently. 45 minutes between a U.S. president and the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen.
And the president just wanted to buy Greenland.
Reportedly, yes, was quite insistent. Frederiksen's response was very clear. Greenland is not for sale. Simple as that.
But she offered cooperation.
She did. Offered more cooperation on the existing military bases, on potentially exploiting minerals, but selling, no.
And how did others react to this call?
European officials who heard about it used words like horrendous, a cold shower, said the tone was very firm. There were apparently even threats of specific things, like targeted tariffs against Denmark if they didn't play ball.
Wow. And publicly, how did the president justify this push?
Framed it purely in terms of national security. An absolute necessity, he called it. Needed to protect the free world from Russia and China in the Arctic.
Did he mention force?
He didn't rule out military force, which was obviously quite shocking. And he publicly questioned Denmark's legal right to Greenland, basically saying they should give it up.
That's incredibly blunt diplomacy.
To say the least. The reaction across Europe was intense. Officials were apparently utterly freaked out.
I can imagine.
They saw it as making a foreign policy crisis even worse. Some even compared the rhetoric to, historical acts of aggression. Not good.
And Denmark?
The Danish government went into crisis mode. They were already planning to increase their own military spending in Greenland, but this just escalated everything. It was a real shock to the system.
That whole episode really throws into sharp relief that Greenland isn't just some isolated issue, is it? It's plugged right into bigger Arctic power struggles.
Absolutely. It's smack bang in the middle of this growing strategic rivalry. And a big part of that is the strengthening partnership between Russia and China.
Let's talk about Russia first. They have a huge Arctic presence.
Huge. Russia controls over 53% of the entire Arctic coastline. Their history there goes way back to the conquest of Siberia.
Very recently.
They've been seriously remilitarizing the Arctic,
Right.
reopening old Soviet-era bases, upgrading their navy, especially their northern fleet, developing new weapons like hypersonic missiles. Their Arctic military bases outnumber NATO's by about a third.
Okay, so Russia's digging in. What about China? They're not exactly an Arctic nation geographically.
No, but they declare themselves a near-Arctic state in their 2018 Arctic White Paper.
A near Arctic state. Interesting phrasing. What are they actually doing up there?
They call it a win-win strategy. Lots of investment in infrastructure. They've helped refurbish airports in Greenland, apparently bought an old Danish naval base there. And they're pushing this idea of a polar Silk Road, linking it to their big Belt and Road initiative, basically extending their economic reach northwards.
Even with Greenland putting some brakes on mining recently.
Yeah, Greenland put a ban on uranium mining, which affected a big rare earth project China was interested in, and generally they're cautious about extraction. But China's still involved. They're doing research projects, working on things like satellite communications over the poles, climate change studies. They're playing the long game, signaling they're there to stay.
So you've got the U.S., Russia, China, all these big powers circling. But what about Greenland itself? What do the people who live there want?
That is the crucial question, isn't it? And it's often overlooked. You need to remember Greenland got home rule from Denmark way back in 1979.
Right, giving them control over local stuff.
Exactly. Most domestic affairs. Denmark still handles foreign policy and defense. But then, in 2009, new legislation recognized Greenland's right to full independence under international law.
So independence is a real possibility.
It is. There's a clear path laid out if Greenlanders vote for it. And opinion polls consistently show a majority do favor independence.
But it's complicated, I assume.
Very. There are debates about the timing, how to make independence economically viable, developing their own mineral resources like that Kavanagh field deposit with rare earths and uranium is seen by many as key to diversifying their economy, moving away from Danish subsidies, tackling high unemployment.
But environmental concerns must be huge, too.
Absolutely. There are strict environmental rules and also concerns about relying too much on foreign investment, foreign labor, losing control. It's a delicate balancing act for them. They're very much trying to navigate their own future amidst all this external pressure.
So we've really covered a lot of ground here. From, Seward's early ambitions through the Cold War's icy grip, right up to today's scramble for resources and strategic positioning.
Yeah, Greenland's story really is a lens through which you can see these huge global shifts playing out.
Its resources, its location,
Yeah.
now right at the heart of this intense global competition, and it's all being accelerated by the melting ice.
Exactly. The future of Greenland really is like a microcosm of bigger global trends. You see environmental change unlocking economic opportunities, which then reignites these old geopolitical rivalries. Its strategic importance isn't going away, it's just changing, evolving.
Which leaves us with a really big question, doesn't it? As the Arctic keeps thawing, how are all these competing interests, the big powers, China, Russia, the U.S., going to interact with the aspirations of the Greenlandic people for their own future? How is that all going to shape what happens to this huge, unique land? And maybe more importantly, what could that mean for the rest of us, for the wider international order?